Hey guys, what's happening? DPG, wearing my Wolfpack hat. Toronto Wolfpack, one of the only global ambassadors for them. But, I digress. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about I think it's a Netflix movie, The Gentlemen, featuring Matthew McConaughey, primarily. Hugh Grant also has a significant role, and directed by Guy Ritchie. So I want to cover this in two different ways. First, I want to talk about the movie a little bit, just sort of give you a brief review and critique. It's the DPG opinion, which is worth more than anybody else's. And secondly, I want to relate it to the actor who might aspire to be in a similar movie or any movie, and what it is that they may or may not be able to use from this. So the movie itself, very, very typical Guy Ritchie. Like, if you guys have known of Guy Ritchie for as long as I have, you remember his first, I don't know if it was actually his first movie, but his first well-known movie, which was Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. And honestly, that was Guy Ritchie at his best. That was Jason Statham's breakout party. A lot of actors from that movie went on to great success afterwards. But this is almost, I wouldn't say it's a cookie cutter. It's not exactly the same, but the style is just so painfully similar. But I guess he's trying to be a little original by the way he delivered it in somewhat of a Quentin Tarantino-esque fashion. And basically how the movie is structured is Matthew McConaughey appears in the beginning. Don't want to say what happens. Spoiler alert. Okay, spoiler alert. If you don't want to know, then skip forward about 15 seconds. The first scene, he walks into a bar, sits down, like the bartender he orders a pint and a pickled egg, because it's alliteration, pint and a pickled egg. And he sits down and he gets on the phone and he says something like, "What?" And right as he says that, some guy pulls out a revolver, or not a revolver, but a handgun, and shoots him in the back of the head, and you just see blood spray onto the beer bottle, I guess, or the pickled egg. And I'm like, wow, that was weird. I thought he was the star of this movie. And okay, if you skipped that part, you're back. Maybe I'll tell you come back at 2:50. Yeah, okay. I'll tell you when to come back. But he's shot. Then we go to another scene where there's a guy in his apartment, or he comes home from his apartment, and it's Charlie Hunnam, who is the star of he's the star of a lot of things, actually. He's been acting for a long, long time, but he is the star of, in particular, Sons of Anarchy. He's the blonde dude who a lot of people probably didn't realize is actually English. I didn't even realize that either until a while ago. And he is in his house and he hears a voice behind him, and it's Hugh Grant. And Hugh Grant is all of a sudden doing this Guy Ritchie, argy bargy, what are you doing? Oh, hello, governor. Right, here we go. Gonna tell you a story, all right? Can I have a steak? Okay, he does that whole thing. And he proceeds to tell him the story of this guy who's played by Matthew McConaughey, and his drug empire and how he set it up, etc., etc. Now, the premise was interesting, but sitting through it was not that pleasant. And in fact, I couldn't sit through the whole thing. I was watching it with my fiance, and she lost interest very quickly. She's like, what the F are they saying, right? At least I can understand Cockney English. She couldn't even understand it. So you literally have to watch this with the subtitles on if you are not excellent at picking up not only Cockney English, but they also use slang, right? They say easy peasy lemon squeezy. They say things like that rhyme with the word that they are trying to communicate. Like take the P's and Paz, means take the stairs or something. And I don't know any of their lingo, but I know how they use it. So I can understand what they're saying most of the time, and at least I get 80% of the words or whatever. She couldn't get, she's just like, what? So, it's a little painful because it's quite long and it's quite slow, and they keep cutting back between the telling of the story and the story as it unfolds, right? So Hugh Grant is telling Charlie Hunnam the story, and then it'll go to, Matthew McConaughey and his drug empire, what's going on there, et cetera, et cetera. And, there's a lot of British-style violence, which is funny. They show up unarmed, right? Like, this stuff would never fly in America. It's hilarious. You've got, 7 or 8 guys break into this drug den, and they don't have a weapon on them. And the guys that come out to confront them, there's 10 of them, and they don't have a weapon either. And they literally have a punch-up. It's like, only use your fists, right? And they have this big MMA fest where they're doing triangle chokes and arm bars and, kimuras and all this stuff. It's really funny. Funny in that how ridiculous it is if you're used to watching American movies where they just pull out AKs and rat-tat-tat-tat everywhere. So, there's that kind of lack of believability. It's almost silly. Like, really, you expect me to buy that? And after a while, you don't quite understand why you're even listening to the story. It's, let me tell you a story. And look, I am not, at the best of times, the best person to pick up every factoid that's going on during the first time I see a movie. Because my mind just wanders. I have wicked ADD, and it's just I'm always having to pull it back in. So there may have been a purpose to this story, but I never picked up on it. And they didn't remind us of it enough, at least for my taste, so that I knew why he was even telling the story in the first place. But basically it was about, Matthew McConaughey setting up this empire, trying to sell it to this guy who is the main number one son of the patriarch in this show Succession, which is on Amazon, I believe. And he plays this really kind of la-di-da type of guy, whatever. That was a choice for whatever reason. Who knows? And that was kind of weird. And to be honest, in this day and age, I feel like, I don't know, what are they trying to prove there? He's lighting the loafers, so what? How is that relevant to the character? No idea. I guess they think it makes it interesting rather than the guy he plays in Succession, or maybe as an actor, he thinks it's fun to do that. But does that help the story? I don't know. You can tell me what you think. Is that worthwhile, having this guy sort of play effeminate when actually maybe he is effeminate and he's playing a tough guy in Succession. I don't know, but just tell me what you guys think of that. But anyway, they tell this story and it kind of goes on. I can't say we got too far into it, and then we kind of go, it was a little late at night, and we were like, yeah, I think we should save the rest of this for another time. Okay, so that's my review. I would just say it kind of dragged on a little bit. Even though they try to have action, it's just not that compelling, I would say. The whole thing just wasn't that compelling. But then again, I am what you'd call an experienced individual. I've traveled a lot. I'm educated, and I'm older. So my criteria is probably a lot tougher than the average, moviegoer. So I don't want to scare you off completely. Just say, for somebody like me, it might not be that great. If you are someone who is newer to the world and hasn't seen every freaking movie that's been out since 1972, right, and all the great ones along the way, your expectations are high. My expectations are high, so maybe yours aren't quite as high. And maybe you'll be a crotchety old curmudgeon when you're my age. But for now, I don't know, maybe see it. It could be interesting for you. But let's talk about the actors, okay? So first of all, I feel sorry for Charlie Hunnam because he didn't get to talk much, and he's this big star. But maybe he did later, I don't know. Matthew McConaughey was basically Matthew McConaughey. He stares off into the distance a lot and speaks in a monotone way. It's kind of his thing. And he's got the Texas twang going on, so he's like, well, I created this empire by buying up the estates of some of the gentry in England because, you know, they inherit the estates, but they don't have the cash to pay for it. So I took care of that for them. Anyway, that's like the worst McConaughey impression ever. But it's interesting to think about, okay, who's doing what, right? Who's being themselves? Matthew McConaughey is just definitely being himself, and that's what he's good at, and that's what he's known for. You know, he's got his skinny self when he's playing the the guy who is putting the AIDS drug together. Can't think of the name of that movie. And, you know, he can get a little more Southern, a little more Texan, let's call it, when he's playing a football coach, you know, a little more rah, rah, rah. But it's really him. Like, he's not trying to put something on, which is what makes him always watchable. It's the same with Matt Damon. He doesn't do these stupid characterizations where you're like, you know, the guy from Succession who's doing his la-di-da, right? That's not him, I don't think. So whenever you do an affectation, it's very difficult to make it seem authentic because it's not authentic, because every aspect of your personality is so built into you, so ingrained through millions of years of evolution and genetics that people can smell a phony, right? And you can refer to my Meryl Streep video on the phoniest actor Oscar goes to Meryl Streep. Because people who put on affectations, meaning they're doing something that really is completely foreign to them, whether it's an accent's different to a certain extent because it doesn't necessarily mean you're changing your behavior to try and fit some idea of what you think the behavior should be. An accent, if you can pull off an accent, although it will change you, because the reason why, you know, people speak the way they speak has a lot to do with how they grew up, right? Like Cockneys speak like Cockney because they grew up in London under a certain set of conditions. There are also Londoners who grew up in very, privileged surroundings, and they don't speak anything like Cockney, even though they grew up perhaps in adjacent neighborhoods. So when you put on an affectation, and I would say even an accent, if you aren't that person, like even if you put on a pompous English accent, if you can do it, it doesn't mean you're going to be believable as a pompous English person, because you don't know what it's like to grow up as a pompous English person, an upper cruster who went to Eton and Oxford and was a Rhodes Scholar, although I don't think rich people generally get Rhodes Scholarships because it's supposed to be for people who are financially less privileged. But anyway, point being, there's a lot of interesting stuff that an actor can learn from watching a movie like this, where you have actors from different countries playing different accents and different character types. Like, I will say this, Hugh Grant, who is an upper cruster, who's very comfortable speaking the Queen's English and even the upper crust English of the 18th century, the 19th century, you know. Oh, how are you today? Lovely day for a horse race. Oh, shall we take a walk in the backwoods? You know, shall we go fox hunting? You know, he does all that stuff really well, much better than I do. But he actually pulled off, I don't know if it was a Cockney. In fact, it started off kind of Cockney sounding, but I think he actually lightened it up just so that it would be understandable for more people. I think that's what happened. I can't be 100% sure of that, but I feel like that he got a little less heavy on the, how's it going, Governor? Right, here we go. So there was various actors doing various things. There's also a lot of actors you've never seen before, so you don't know if they're doing anything. But, it's just interesting. I feel like here's the challenge I have for you guys. If you watch the movie, come back to this video and tell me, who do you think's performances were the most authentic, were the most believable, where you were not left thinking about what they were doing, but you were rather caught up in what they were doing, if that makes sense, okay? Because a good actor doesn't make you go, oh, what a brilliant accent they did. You are thinking, what an interesting person this is, because you are you are connecting with them because you can feel their authenticity and the truth that they are speaking from, from the heart and soul. Whereas Meryl Streep wins a lot of these awards, and same with who else does a lot of that stuff? I mean, Kevin Spacey, he likes to do impressions of people because he's really good at it, right? But it's a very shallow impersonation. You don't know what that person, what their life was like. And so since you're not being authentic as a person and you're trying to do an impression of somebody's life, that's how it comes across, because you just read about them and so you somehow think you can live through what they lived through, but of course you can't, because you're not trying to live through the moments as they happen, which is what an actor should do at all times. You're trying to live through somebody else's past moments and how you think they went, despite the fact that it's actually going on right in front of you, and you could take cues from what's going on around you at the moment, which is much more authentic and believable. And you'll see people that are doing impressions of others and they are living through it. And then you'll see people who are doing impressions of others, but they are just doing a knockoff. They're doing kind of a comedic version of this person. It's not supposed to be comedic, but because it's so like typical, it's so stereotypical. Oh yeah, that's how you do a Winston Churchill impression. This is our finest hour, rather than just saying, this is our finest hour, because if you say it authentically, even if you don't look like him, you'll feel it and you'll go, oh yeah, that's when Winston Churchill said that. This is our finest hour. Like, you'll relate to it. Whereas, it's hard to relate to somebody who's just putting something on, who's faking it. Jim Carrey is one of the few people who likes to do different things, but he commits. But even when he commits, you can tell it's kind of fake. Like, everyone said, oh my gosh, he was just so Andy Kaufman. No, he really wasn't. He was Jim Carrey who, kind of convinced the media, because the media likes a good story, that he was living Andy Kaufman. Well, you can't live Andy Kaufman. You have no idea what Andy Kaufman went through. You have an idea of what it looks like he went through, but you don't know what's going on inside of him, and that's the only thing that counts, right, guys? So let me know who you thought did the most authentic acting, and let me know who you thought was faking it until they are making it, and we'll see if there's any consensus. But otherwise, check out the movie. I honestly didn't want to dissuade you, but check it out, because Matthew McConaughey is solid as always. Hugh Grant, he's actually pretty darn solid. And if you haven't seen Hugh Grant as a young man, you might never think that this isn't the Hugh Grant we're used to seeing. He's pretty convincing, and he's got these pretty cool Ray-Ban Wayfarers with orange lenses that I'm kind of partial to, as you may have noticed. Anyway, guys, that's it for now. Got a little long-winded, but when you have so much good information to share, how can you stop it short? I will talk to you soon.